we were about to tell you that if you didn't get rid of him, we were going to start leaving. Like, so what?
Whoa.
And what it was is that I kept trying to rescue the underperformer. And as a result, the top performers viewed me as tolerating underperformance as a leader.
Matt Woolley Podcast.
All right, let's kick it off. All right. Today, my guest is Scott Benedict. Scott, thank you for coming on to the Matt Woolley Podcast.
You bet. I'm excited to be here.
Yeah, so had a lot of different people. We know a lot of the same circles.
Yeah.
And was just kind of, talking to different people. Your name came up, and then I was like, oh yeah, I've run into this guy several times. We just never really made a good acquaintance. But so before we get off into that, who is Scott Benedict? Well, let's go through the history, and I'm going to be honest with you, you've got quite the history here.
You've been stalking me on LinkedIn.
I have been stalking you on LinkedIn, good sir. All right, so you went to UAM, graduated at ASU.
Yes.
You've been in service merchandise. You worked for service merchandise as a merchandiser, excuse me. You worked as a director of e-commerce at Walmart, which that's interesting time for that.
That's an interesting story unto itself, but yeah, keep going.
You've been a GM for Best Buy, Sam's Club, senior buyer for consumer electronics, Sam's Club director of site merchandising, Sam's Club senior director of member services, Walmart director for indirect spend management.
Yeah.
Also worked for Groupon as a divisional merchandise manager. Here's another interesting one, Texas A&M Center for Retailing Studies. Yes. You're an executive professor and director.
Yeah.
Also worked for the beloved White Spider.
Yes.
With Eric and company.
We were corporate neighbors.
Yes, we were. We made. There was a lot of passing in the hall. But you're VP of Partnerships. Also, McMillan Doolittle, affiliate partner. 8th and Walton VP of Education and Growth. Mm-hmm. RETHINK Retail Advisor for RETHINK Advisory. Yes. STOLTZ ONE, Senior VP for Sales and Marketing. And you've got your own hustle going on, too, right now. Benedict Enterprises, LLC.
Yeah.
Lord Almighty, you've got it all in retail. So let's start off.
Yes.
Where are you from, Scott? Where is your origin?
You bet. So, interesting story. And I surprise people when I tell this story because I was born on Long Island, New York, and grew up in Chicago. I consider Chicago my hometown, and only recently have I now lived in Arkansas longer than I lived in Chicago. But that was where my father was transferred to Chicago when I was literally a baby. I was about 6 months old. Grew up in their area, and then my parents retired to Arkansas, and that was my first involvement in being and living in Arkansas. Mm-hmm. And when I graduated from Arkansas State, I left and didn't foresee that I would ever be back. And then one day, Walmart came looking, and I ended up coming here and have now lived in Northwest Arkansas three different occasions, twice working for Walmart, and then came back after my stint in academia at Texas A&M, and have been back now for about 3 years. So really love the area.
There's so many questions. Now, you've got a really interesting career history. It's pretty cool. Yeah. Let's talk about because I did say we started talking about this earlier. I want to get this on tape. I know that. So that had to have been an interesting journey. You'd said that, your parents had retired to Southern Arkansas, which is why you went to UAM.
Initially, yes.
So what age was this?
So I'm the fifth of 5 children, so I was the last child. So I literally got out of high school, and 2 weeks later, my parents retired.
Oh, wow.
Arkansas. So awesome. My mother referred to me as their bonus child, which in no way, shape, or form means I was unexpected. I was a bonus child, but that proximity to finishing high school and having your parents retire was interesting because I had to make the decision to stay in Chicago or come here to Arkansas. And I did both. I stayed in Chicago for a while, and then eventually came to Arkansas. And really, it's interesting because it is very different culture, different dynamics in Chicago.
I bet it was a little bit of a culture shock.
It was
coming from that area,
particularly going from Chicago to Monticello first. Jonesboro, it's interesting where Arkansas State is. Not only was that a little bit more diverse and a little bit closer, but there was many fellow Chicagoans who came down and went to Arkansas State at that time. So I ended up making a number of lifelong friends of folks who also shared coming to Arkansas from Chicago, and that was kind of interesting. So
that's cool. So let's talk about the beginnings of your journey. Obviously, you've been very retail heavy.
Yes.
Was that always your ambition?
No, in fact, the opposite was true. And what's interesting is throughout my career, I've encountered a lot of people for whom retail was not intentional. It was supposed to be temporary until something else came along. And I'm one of those people, and I studied media and communications at Arkansas State and thought I wanted to go either to work for a broadcast, radio, TV. Cable was new at the time. That'll date me a little bit. I really thought I would do that. Found it was a difficult industry to break into, so I went into retailing temporarily to kind of support myself. And that was several decades ago, and never really went back. It was ironic until I started engaging in podcasting and webinars and hosting my own podcast.
What is that podcast, by the way?
It's the Digital Front Door, which is part of, under the umbrella of doing business in Bentonville, and it's been a lot of fun. But I wish my parents were still here because I finally connected retailing with media and communications in a medium.
You finally came full circle.
A medium that didn't exist when I got out of school. And I said, well, up in heaven, I'm sure they're looking down and smiling. Well, he finally put his degree
about time, Scott.
To use. Scott, it would take you a few decades to do it. We're glad we paid for that education. So.
That's great. So you started out. I'm going to have to go back. Most of the time I can. You've had so many interesting titles here. So you got your start out with service merchandise. Is that correct?
That's the first major retailer I worked for. I also worked on the sales floor for a couple of retailers who are no longer with us, and most of your listeners are not even going to recognize them. Montgomery Ward's was one of them.
Oh, wow.
Cool. So I did a little time there. I don't put them on my LinkedIn profile anymore because I have to explain to people who they are since they're not around anymore. But I started on the sales floor, and that was the keeping myself employed and having income while I figured out how to get broadcasting. And eventually I thought, well, this retailing thing's kind of fun, but is there a more corporate type of role? And I lived in Denver at the time, and in Denver there was a wholesale club company called Pace Membership Warehouse, which eventually would be acquired by Sam's Club.
Okay.
But this club format at the time was a brand new thing, and they had a buying office there, and I loved consumer electronics, and so they had an entry-level opportunity in the buying office to be a buyer's assistant and to write purchase orders and negotiate with vendors and do these sort of things. And that was when my love of retailing went from passive to all in, and it was those roles in smaller companies. And what would constitute a startup company at the time, Pace, was 16 locations, and just in a few parts of the country they would grow to be fairly big before Sam's Club acquired them. But it was just going from working in a store to a corporate role and being involved in buying that the love of retailing really took hold, and I never
What was it that just...
I think the biggest thing about retailing, and I would encourage anybody, whatever career you might be pursuing, is that it was always changing. It was never dull. There was some new challenge, some new opportunity, some new problem to be encountered every day, every week, every year. And I love that. And then I in job interviews back then, I used to say, well, one of the things I really liked about particular roles that I ended up having over the course of my career in retailing is occasionally I found something that was hard. In other words, it was a challenge.
Mm-hmm.
It really forced me to use all my skills, to develop new skills, to keep me constantly trying to learn new things. And a number of those roles were not accidental. I picked them because they added something to my experience and to my knowledge and to my background that a prior role didn't, but they kind of built upon the foundation. Each one built upon the foundation of the prior role. And whether you go into retailing or whatever career endeavor, having roles that kind of challenge you, grow you, but you kind of add to your skill set, add to your knowledge base, both in that profession and then as a leader and managing other people. Those are the things that I really enjoy. I found that retailing really was my path to accomplish a lot of those.
It's heavy. Yeah. So, I mean, was it one of those situations where it just stuck right away? Like right away you knew, or was it something, would you say it was I'm trying to think in the perspective, because one thing I try to do on this podcast is try to think to the perspective of the guy that's starting out.
Yes.
Because a lot of the times we're giving advice like, turn it and burn it, you know what I mean? Like make it happen, that kind of thing. But what we don't do a good job of, I think, is explaining kind of what you just talked about, the progression, the falling into it. I mean, in that time, when were you saying retail? This is it. This is what I'm going to do. So you were all in.
Yes.
Right from the get-go.
Well, I wouldn't say it was love at first sight, but it was love pretty quick. It happened pretty fast. And particularly when I got into a buying role, and it was so interesting because it was a little bit of a peek behind the curtain. In other words, we all can walk into a retail store or today go onto a website and see what a customer sees or see the world as a customer does, but to see behind the curtain, what are the decisions that happen about a product or a category or starting a new retail format, or what goes into a new product being on a sales floor. Well, there's work that happened months, in some cases years ahead of time that had to happen for that product to eventually land on the shelf, or now land on a digital shelf online. And what was interesting and kind of enticing was to see that process, to see how buyers made decisions when I was assisting one before I became one, and how suppliers worked and how they developed new products and how they made decisions about new things. And it was interesting then. It's even more interesting today because we have a wonderful combination of established companies and established brands coming up with new products. And we have a wonderful startup community within retailing, particularly in consumer brands, but in other areas of retail as well. That new thing, there's so many wonderful startup stories of brands. Somebody had a great idea, tested it, tried it, went through difficult times, refined it, and eventually it became successful, and either it grew to be a huge brand, or some cases it grew to be a certain size and they sold it and then started their next adventure. But retailing enables a lot of that. And whether you're the retailer or the brand, you kind of get a behind the curtain look at all that and how it unfolds.
That's got to feel rewarding. I know it does for us from it, which we're on a different side of it at Design Steins, but I know it's, from the buyer perspective, and I have several friends, that are familiar with the territory. You guys deal with, along with the supplier, all the actual headaches of making
in some cases we cause them.
Yeah, that's true.
Which causes people to come use
that 100%.
Right?
Yeah.
But in some cases we are on the receiving end as well. But it is that constant churn and things that is really exciting.
The reward, though, just walking the aisle and seeing it there.
Yes.
And it's just funny. We go through it all the time. We'll whether it's a packaging design, display, whatever it is, people don't see the 20 meetings that it took to get there. It's just like, this looks great, I'll take that.
Yes.
And nobody really understands retail unless you're just
in the fray.
Yeah, that's in the fray.
Yep.
Yeah. But it's got to feel good.
It does. Particularly when,
do you have any notables that you?
I can think of a couple things. One, I was in consumer electronics for most of my buying career, not all of it, but most of it. And so Black Friday was a huge thing. And I'm proud to tell you that the 5 years that I bought consumer electronics for Sam's Club, we set a record on Black Friday 4 out of the 5 years.
Oh, nice.
One of those years was the 2009 financial crisis, and we didn't set a record then, but we did hit our budget, so
that's
that
a big
worked
deal.
out. But to have that one day that's at the time the biggest day in retailing. Now Cyber Monday feels like it's a little bit bigger single day, and it's not the same in every product category. Food has other days that are bigger. Apparel has other days that are bigger, but it's huge in my area of the business. Setting sales records and seeing a plan that started in the spring come to fruition there on that day was really exciting and a lot of fun. And then I also spent some time in the international division. I helped us launch Sam's Club in Canada.
Oh, wow.
Go from concept to seeing the first clubs get their merchandise, get their steel racks put up, and get ready to open. That was kind of an emotional experience as well, because it's like you were in it from the time that there was no team in Canada. It was just an idea to see the day that they were ready to cut the ribbon on.
That's cool.
And unfortunately, it didn't work out. Walmart Canada was great. Sam's Club didn't work out the way we'd hope. But to go from concept to opening day was really an exciting thing. So that those two kind of stand out in my mind.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Well, let's talk about. There's so many things I want to hit on here, and I have a lot of questions too. Let's talk about you're working at the director of e-com. So
yes,
that was an interesting time, because you're kind of there at it's not the dawn of the internet, but you were there at the dawn of
really
e-com.
darn close.
It really is.
Yes.
You weren't far off.
Yeah, so it's interesting. Right before joining Walmart and being part of the team that started what was then called Walmart Online, that grew up to become Walmart.com, I was at a catalog retailer, Service Merchandise. You referenced them earlier, and I view catalog retailing as kind of the precursor to online retailing, because if you think about it, online, at least at the time, is an online catalog.
Yeah.
So it was a digital equivalent of what we were doing in catalog retailing, and both myself and my wife were there. That's where we actually met at Service Merchandise. But I was just kind of chafing at the bit back there it was kind of the mid-90s about the fact that I saw this emerging, and this idea of e-commerce was emerging, and I felt like Service Merchandise really needed to be there. Obviously, because I was involved in consumer electronics, that was one of the first categories that really took off online, was consumer electronics, computers, and then entertainment media, so music, movies, books. Books was obviously Amazon's very first business, and they remain one of the biggest book resellers to this day.
Pretty amazing story there too.
That's a whole nother podcast just on that one topic.
Yeah.
But what was interesting was you could see that this was going to become something because the consumer was enthralled by it. Now, at that point, it was a small segment of the consumer base, but it obviously grew and grew very, very quickly. And when my wife and I went to tell Service Merchandise that we were leaving to come here to Northwest Arkansas, and I was going to be with Walmart Online, she was going to be in another area of the business, the CEO of Service Merchandise called me into his office and said, okay, I'm losing 2 buyers, not just you, but your wife as well. What's going on here? And I explained to him and why I thought, e-commerce was a thing. And in fact...
So you stuck up from the beginning.
Yes.
There was a lot of naysayers.
Well, there was. Here's the famous quote that I share from time to time. It was the CEO said to me, Scott, this whole e-commerce thing is just a fad. It's not really going to last. And you're leaving here, this very well-established company, to go there and this thing, and it probably won't last. And I said, well, respectfully, sir, you'd always be respectful with your CEO. And I said, not only do I think it's going to be something, but I think service merchandise would be really well positioned, but I just don't see that we're going there. Walmart's willing to go there, so I want to be a part of it. I said, you take images of every product, you write descriptions of every product, you have the ability to pick, pack, and ship orders out of the catalog fulfillment facilities. You have everything there to be successful. Walmart's having to go build all of that because they didn't take pictures of every item. They didn't write descriptions. They just put things on a shelf, right? So anyways, I come here and was part of that, and I think what's interesting is subsequently service merchandise went Chapter 11, eventually went Chapter 7 and dissolved, and then the CEO bought the name and the intellectual property out of bankruptcy, and today he operates servicemerchandise.com. So... do you ever wonder if he reflects on your conversation? Well, hopefully he doesn't see this podcast. I've talked about it on social media and a couple times over the years, and I don't mean it to be derogatory. I mean it to say retailing is constantly changing, and the customer is always the driver of that. And it didn't matter what we think. The customer liked e-commerce. Customer liked the ability to look and order things from home, from their computer, and have them show up on their doorstep, which in the early days, that was the only way an e-commerce order could happen. Ironically, even back then, we had 4 supercenters spread around the country when I first got to Walmart Online that did store fulfillment orders. Now, they were incredibly inefficient. The inventory numbers may or may not have been right, so we occasionally sold things and then had to cancel it because it turns out they were out of stock that day. So there was a lot of early days pain and mistakes that happened, but obviously that's now a huge part of the of the business. But in the early days, it was a challenge. But it was so interesting to see. And one of the great learnings throughout my time with Walmart and Sam's Club was a number of leaders taught us that if you focus on the customer, and that guide your decisions, whether you were a buyer, a store manager, a marketer, in logistics, whatever part of the business you were in, if you designed everything behind what is in the best interest of the customer, you'll generally make the right decisions, and that has proven to be the case time after time after time throughout my career, and then even now as a consultant. If you watch companies from afar that do well or don't, those that focus on the customer tend to do better. Yeah, that is a fantastic wisdom nugget there, and it seems to be so easy, and it's so true, but yet for whatever reason people don't always buy it into it. I don't know why. That, and sometimes they'll say it because it sounds good, looks good on a poster, but don't practice it even when it's hard. And that's really when it's a difficult decision or a challenging decision. That's when you have to revert back to, okay, is that truly my value as a retailer or as someone who's part of the retail ecosystem or not? Not when it's, things are selling great, everything's going wonderfully. That's not when you have to re-examine your values. It's when things are hard that you have to do it. So. Absolutely. Well, you've got a lot of knowledge, Scott. So I thought I did. Is that a nice way of saying I'm old? No, you're putting words in my mouth. You have been there and done a lot of that. And I will say this too. I try to look at perspectives, in the sense of, Design Steins has been around we're working on 16 years now. And so, we weren't as heavily involved in retail as we are now, but I was keeping track of the dynamics since day one, Yes. Good advice. But just in that time, I mean, you got to remember too, that's what I was intrigued about, what your position as the e-com piece, because you were there when people really didn't have a roadmap to anything. Yes. And it's true. It's true. I mean, you guys were making the maps. There were people who literally thought I had lost my mind by going into e-commerce. And then when I went back to physical retail, before you could do both at the same time, which you can today, people in e-commerce go, what, stores, what? That's how. No, they're both.
I've heard both extremes. Like
Yes.
when we were starting out, I remember it was around like the 2000s. We started in 2009, 2010. As far as the federal government is concerned, it was April 2010. But I remember it was around 2012 area that people were still, like you could see everything beginning to really evolve full steam ahead.
Yes.
But people were still not grasping it.
Yeah.
And I just remember hearing both sides of it still argue. There's like what I call a great argument for about 20 years.
Yes.
Where people were like, no, retail's where it's at, or no, online's where it's at. It's like, the reality is like, I think simply put, and this is a very simpleton way to put it, but people love the convenience of online, but they still also love the touch and feel.
Yes.
There's no beating the experience. But, if you're ordering plastic forks, online's where it's at. But if there's some cool new toy or widget or whatever, there's nothing like seeing it in retail. And the people that winning are simply just knowing how to do both properly.
Yeah, exactly. It's interesting that during my time in academia, when I was with Texas A&M, obviously I'm surrounded with some really very educated, really smart people, but I had to referee more than a few conversations about which, because we're talking about in the context of what's the curriculum, what sort of program should we be putting together for students wanting to develop a career in retailing. And it was the or conversation, I call it, stores or online. And I would sit there and make the argument about it's not an or, it's an and.
Mm-hmm.
What we should be concerned about is students who would come out of this or any other university, and I teasingly call it being bilingual. They speak both physical and digital retail, and they understand the key elements of both, because that's where retail is headed. And even since I've been back in Northwest Arkansas in the post-pandemic world, that is absolutely how things have unfolded, is that the pandemic served to accelerate adoption of e-commerce because people had to, in many cases, particularly on things as basic and everyday as their grocery, prescription drugs, diapers, formula, things you had to have. And among some of the retailers that I really admire that had the best plan going into the pandemic, H-E-B, a grocery store, a chain in Texas, could not respect a company more. They had a plan that dated back to 2005 when President Bush at the time said, a global pandemic is something that could be happening. Companies, not just retailers, but companies of all stripes, should really have a plan for something like that. And he was unfortunately prophetic, and H-E-B had one of the best plans going into that. Now, everybody's plan had to evolve and change. And I told this was while I was at Texas A&M, and I told my students, there's a great learning opportunity from this horrible event that I hope you take advantage of. I also hope that you guys live long enough that this never happens again. But there's learnings of people who did things well and people who did things poorly. In some cases, in Chapter 11 or Chapter 7.
It was a wild, wild west.
It was. But it's those companies that did particularly well did things that were in service to the customer. And I'll never forget, one of the things that H-E-B did is they started delivering prescriptions, particularly to seniors, free.
That's awesome.
We're going to bring it, and they lost money on that.
Oh, they did, but they were doing good.
But
and they built loyal followers.
Well, that's exactly it. Is that's one of my go-to examples of doing things for the customer will ultimately benefit you. And now customers trust them to deliver things. Customers trust them to pick out produce. That they have store associates that know how to pick. This is a good head of lettuce. This is a big head of lettuce. Pick this, don't pick this. They invested in that training. Walmart did a ton of that as well. A number of other retailers did that really well, but they took advantage of a situation and said, we need to step up and we need to take care of people, because what we sell are the fundamental basics that people need to live their lives. If we do that well, not only will we get through this, but we will have earned the trust and the respect of our customers after this is all over and people want to go back into stores. And obviously, when the pandemic started to wane, people started going back into stores. Oh, e-commerce is no longer an issue. People love stores. Once again, both can be true
absolutely
at the same time. And that's, in fact, how the industry has evolved in the years since the pandemic. Is it got people to try e-commerce. It got people to step up and earn customer trust. But ultimately, it feels like the retailers that are doing really well are those that view it as an and, be good at both, not one or the other.
Yeah.
So
they there seems to be that trend. Well, I say trend. I call it a bad habit. There's people that they dig their heels in.
Yes.
It's like, we're just going to stand on this and that's that. And it's like, man, that is not good. Just please listen to other people.
Well, as an native Chicagoan, there's a very tall black building with white antennas on top of it in downtown Chicago that once was called the Sears Tower. It's not called that anymore because all the people, thank God this got captured and written down, as people who were there through the downfall of Sears will tell you almost to a person that we're successful now, so we just need to keep doing things the way that we're doing them because that's what caused us to be successful up until now. And you take that as contrast to Walmart and Sam's Club, where they said, well, we're successful now, but we can't rely upon that if we don't focus on the customer and evolve the way that we serve them. We'll become like the company with the tall black building with the white antennas in Chicago. and so there's a real lesson in that, and that's a reminder. One of the other buildings, by the way, I worked in Chicago when I was with Groupon, was Montgomery Ward's original catalog distribution center right on the Chicago River and Chicago Avenue, and that's another building that's a monument, because this building, when it was built, it was the largest building of its type in the world. It was built in the early 1900s.
Oh, wow.
Now it's an office building. It's where Groupon happened to be headquartered at when I was there, but it was like, that had
to be a nice reminder walking into it.
Well, that was it. I'd like to be a student not only of retailing, but a student of retail history.
Yeah.
Here in Chicago were two buildings from various stages of the evolution of retail that serve as a reminder. Yeah, the company that built these wonderful, impressive buildings didn't survive because they didn't change. They didn't evolve to serve the customer, and they did so at their peril. And it didn't work out for either of them. One of the things I've really admired about Walmart is Walmart has said, even if we end up knocking off ourselves, in other words, if online takes some sales out of stores, as it turns out, it's helped stores because some of those sales get fulfilled out of stores. But at the time, that was an interesting topic, which is, well, if we're good at e-commerce, is it going to cannibalize stores? Well, it could cannibalize yours, or somebody else's website can cannibalize yours. Which would you prefer? It'd be better if you cannibalize yourself. As it turned out, they didn't cannibalize themselves. They actually made the two pieces it kind of became a 1 + 1 = 3 scenario, where it became more than the sum of the parts.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's switch gears a little bit.
Sure.
So, you've been part of a lot of leadership. You've held a lot of, been a part of a lot of corps and seen a lot of different variables in leadership.
Yeah.
What's one leadership mistake you made early on, and what did it teach you?
So it's interesting because I really felt like working at Walmart and Sam's when David Glass, Don Silverquist, leaders of that,
the great
caliber,
it
was all. I mean, to hear them speak, to hear them talk, then subsequently Lee Scott and Doug McMillan and people like that. It's like, I can't believe I'm getting paid to learn from these people. And there's obviously lessons from those leaders and other leaders, other retailers that I learned a tremendous about. I think the one thing that stood out is one of my roles was with SamsClub.com. When I got back into e-commerce, I was over what was called site merchandising and web analytics, and I had a great team. And what I had is I had a number of really high-performing members of that team who I remain friends with and stay in touch with to this day. but I had a couple underperformers, if I was being candid. And one of the underperformers on the team ended up leaving and going to another division of the company of his own fruition. And after he was gone, some of the higher performer members of the team took me aside. I'm so glad they felt comfortable telling me this. They go, we were about to tell you that if you didn't get rid of him, we were going to start leaving. Like, so what?
Whoa.
And what it was is that I kept trying to rescue the underperformer. And as a result, the top performers viewed me as tolerating underperformance as a leader. And here they were killing themselves to try and grow the business, serve customers, do all the right things. And their question for me is why did you tolerate that level of performance out of that guy for so long? And it hurt a little bit,
right,
to get that candid feedback. But the learnings that I took from that is that if someone on your team is struggling, do you need to make an effort to save them, to help them? Yes. But if it becomes clear that they're not going to make it, you need to help them move on, one, so they can be successful and find the position that's best for them, because this one clearly isn't it. But you also, your top performers are watching, and they want to see whether you tolerate poor behavior or not, poor performance, because that determines just how big of an effort, how hard of an effort that they give. And I was pleased that I then, in subsequent roles that I had in other organizations, when I recognized that someone, I tried to help them, they weren't going to make it, I needed to move them off, either move them to another role, to another part of the company, or exit them out. It sent, not only was it better for them, quite frankly, it's certainly better for the business, but it sent a message to the rest of the team. He has high expectations. He expects the best, and if we don't, it wasn't a kind
of... It's not a motivator. It's not a motivator.
Well, it's one of those... It really tells them I have high standards as a leader, and that I want to see them perform well. And if someone's... I made sure they saw I was really trying to help this person, but when it became clear after weeks and months, not years, can't take forever, and I moved that person on, that sent a signal to them that said, okay, we need to be on the top of our game, and not giving your best won't be tolerated. And I think that lesson, not only was I so thankful that my prior team at samsclub.com took me aside and said, you need to know this. It has stuck with me all these years. But then when I practiced it later in other roles, I saw, they were right, that if you take that approach, you raise the caliber of the team. And quite frankly, you help the underperformers better, because they need to kind of get...
Just not a good fit?
This isn't right for them. Sometimes they'll just be comfortable and live that. No, can't do that. It's not good for them, not good for us, not good, certainly not good for the customer.
So. That's awesome. Yeah, that's great advice. I've seen that one too many times. I call that culture killer, because it will. It murders the culture.
And that's one of the things, is sometimes people are good performers, but they're horrific to the culture. They have bad attitudes, and that bad attitude affects the rest of the team, or infects the rest of the team.
Yeah.
In some cases, you have to get rid of top performers, because the way in which they accomplish what they accomplish might be great, but the way they accomplish it is bad and cancerous to the organization, and brings everybody else's attitudes down. Absolutely. And what you end up doing is then you'll lose top performers, because if you tolerate it, they're going, well, I got to leave.
That's the key. It's the poison. It's poison in the well. You're allowing poison to seep into the well.
That's one of the great learnings, hard-won learnings that I got. So,
here's one.
Yeah.
What common blind spots do brands or retailers have when launching new products or entering new categories?
Yeah.
You probably don't have the time for that one, but in a nutshell,
that's another episode. but I'll try and keep it to the highlights. One, there's a certain amount of data and consumer insights that we are blessed with right now that provide great input on whether a product is going to be successful with the customer that you think you're building it for. And one of the things my e-commerce experience taught me was the value of consumer feedback, like ratings or reviews, and some of the things that people say. Social media obviously also is a great tool for getting feedback. So there's a lot of ways you can get very quick, very valuable feedback on whether a product is going to work or not, or whether a category is going to work or a brand's going to work. That both is valuable to the retailer and to the brand. And so using that in a way that makes you either refine the product, refine how you tell the story of the product, or decide that we were passionate about it, but it just didn't resonate with the audience. You can make those decisions quickly, but it's a little bit like that underperforming associate. At some point you have to quit trying to save it. Right. If it's not going to work, it's not going to work. Move on. In some cases, it comes off the market, gets refined, and comes back a couple of years later in a different version, and then it's successful. That happens. Some cases it just absolutely was not. One of my painful go-to examples was 3D technology. When I was the buyer, 3D was a huge thing in movie theaters, 50s and 60s. In the late 2000s and early 2010s, 3D television, 3D movies, 3D Blu-ray players at the time, this was before streaming, and 3D movies and movie theaters came back around.
Yeah, I remember.
And you remember there's a couple movies that were shot in 3D that were very, very successful and did very well. So we all thought, well, 3D is the thing. Consumers love it. Well, after you got past those first couple of movies that were really done well and took advantage of the technology, people just did not like wearing glasses.
Yeah, I don't blame them.
and so that's one of those that, we were also passionate throughout the consumer electronics industry, the entertainment industry, the movie industry. Oh, this is great. And eventually the consumer told us, if you can figure out a way to make it 3D without us having to wear glasses, we can have a conversation. But after the novelty wore off, nope.
No thanks.
And now it's gone, and I don't think it's coming back, at least not during my lifetime, maybe another 50 years. So we'll bring it back around again, but
yeah, it'll always remain a novelty, probably, in my mind, if it does come back. Okay, so I have another question popped in my head. I'm getting off script here. Okay. So you had mentioned, I'm trying to articulate this the right way. You had mentioned, we're going to have to cut this, Scott, because I'm going to sound like an idiot. Actually,
that's what editing is for.
It is. Yes. Hey, marker. So did you ever, here's what I was going to say. This isn't a marker, by the way. We leave it all in. We let everybody know how incompetent I can be at times. Here's how I want to say this. So you were brought in as a buyer.
Yeah.
You were in the time of that, where essentially you had old school training with the evolution of new school technology.
Yes.
Now, here's what I will say, and this is no shun to anybody's style. You can create success doing things a lot of different ways.
Yes.
Okay. So I have noticed, though, that guys that are blessed enough to get that old school training, but also understand, and when I say old school training, I refer to it as gut buying. Like this is something, this is it.
Yes.
But I've also seen let me continue my statement. That alongside understanding the analytics, the insights of these things, that's huge, right?
Right.
But I've seen a trend too, where I think really, really good products aren't given the legs that they need.
Yes.
Because of the initial insights.
Yes.
And there are buyers that 100% completely rely on that. So where does Scott live between knowing, because you were trained by old school gut buyers, but you also understand, you know what I'm talking about,
Yes, but I'm going to challenge one of your views here.
Okay.
So first of all, even in earlier periods when less data was available from which a buyer made decision, invariably there was always some data.
Yeah, I'm not discounting. I'm not saying they were just picking it out of a hat. But
not close to what we have today.
Right.
But there's always been, and in some cases the data was, I went ahead and bought it and it did or did not sell, or it sold in this location. So the people who bought it were women versus men, or younger versus older, or whatever those data points were. And part of the reason throughout my career, I've always been encouraged to go out and visit stores and talk to not only customers, but to talk to people that work in the stores who deal with customers every day, is those are some informal data points, okay? So now fast forward to now, and obviously there's a whole lot more data and data points. And the only thing that I'm concerned, and I encountered people of this mindset, particularly in my e-commerce experience, where just like put everything out there and the algorithms will feature the right items to the right people on the right day. Let technology do everything. I don't even know why you guys have buyers anymore. I don't even know what you buyers do. That's also the other extreme that's wrong as well. I think one of the things that I've really admired is Walmart changed the mission statement of the company to be people-led, tech-powered, or tech-enabled. I think it's tech-powered. And I really think that a buyer informed by data, it makes the best decisions. That doesn't mean a buyer can't ever still make a mistake, even now with all the data we have. But I think, to kind of to your root question, which is that how has buying evolved and how does someone stay current? It's you have to view all these things as tools, as inputs in your decisions. And I'm sure that there are people who looked at some of my decisions and said that was based on his experience or his gut or whatever. Well, my experience and my gut were informed by data. Even that.
Yeah.
And before e-commerce, even before the quality and the level of data that we have today. And so to use data, information, technology to make decisions is wonderful. And I believe that that's the thing is that we have so much data. Boiling it down to the important, relevant facts is part of the challenge. Both if you work at a consumer brand, you have to decide what products to bring to market, and you're a buyer, and you have to decide what products to buy. Data should inform those decisions, but ultimately those data inform your experience over time and help you make better decisions. And you also, I've told this both when I was in buying and then when I was teaching buyers or teaching people going in retail in academia, is part of being a buyer is accepting the fact that you will invariably do something wrong. You will invariably pick the wrong item, make the wrong decision, buy too much, buy too little, keep that product too long once it's passed. You'll invariably make those. So you kind of go into it accepting the fact that I will use all of the inputs that I can to make good decisions, and I'll certainly have a batting average that no Major League Baseball player will ever achieve. But you have to address the fact that you will make some wrong decisions, and you have to recognize it and make a call. That item isn't working, that brand isn't working, that category isn't working out, and they need to go and take an action and do something about it. So inaction is probably the worst thing you can do as a merchant, or even as a product person in a brand. Use all those inputs, but then I still think a qualified, experienced person has to make the decision, leveraging all of those inputs.
Is that kind of what you're doing right now too? You can see the fork in the road. You're kind of you're an advisor to keep it from derailing.
It is, and it's interesting because not only does my academic experience inform, this is what I think graduates should be coming out of school prepared to do, and it's different than what people in various roles throughout retailing should be prepared to do. But I also look at so many, both retailers and consumer brands are thinking so much and so hard, as they should, about their technology investments, but are not thinking about, okay, once I make these investments, how do I then bring the humans along, make sure they have the right training to use this technology to do a better job at whatever role it is they play, from associate out in the store to a supply chain person to a buyer to a marketer, whatever that is, to a product manager at a consumer brand. It's how do you make sure that they have the training to use the technology? Otherwise, the technology doesn't. You don't unlock the full value of the technology, I guess. So that's the thing is that I advocate, particularly in my role as a consultant, and some of the guests that I have on my podcasts are the purpose is to expose kind of new parts of retail and how technology informs and enables, but you still have to train people as well. And I think that's important both in academia and within those companies, kind of lifelong. If you want to continue to be a student, if you're the professional, you want to provide that training if you're the leaders in your organization.
Speaking of advancements in retail,
yes,
top level, what's Scott's take on AI involvement? Because it's starting to cover the industry.
It is. It is both a wonderful tool that will make better decisions more efficiently and increase speed, and all those are good things. I worry about the ethical. The lack of ethical guardrails around the use of AI, not only in retailing, but in marketing and social media, everything, in a lot of areas. And so I think a lot of things, it is wonderful, and it will make business better. It will make the experience for consumers better, but it needs some guardrails and some regulation. And I don't think some of the leaders that we have today are enough educated on it to make good decisions about appropriate regulation.
They love what the magic wand does, but they don't see what's going on behind that.
And that's just it. We talk about one of the cornerstones of our country is you have the right to free speech, but you don't have the right to yell fire in a crowded movie theater. In other words, your right ends at the boundary of when you use that right for bad purpose.
Right.
AI and other technologies are like that. It's a wonderful tool. Let's use it. Let's figure out ways to make the business better and make the customer's experience better, but you don't get to use it for bad purposes. And that's the thing where the technology is running faster than the guidelines around its use, whether those that a retailer imposes upon themselves or that our legal regulations that put guardrails around ethical use. So that's the only thing that concerns me. It's a wonderful tool that could be used horribly at the wrong hands.
Yes, absolutely, right. 100%. Okay, so we were running out of time. An hour has absolutely flown by.
Wow.
But
you ask good questions.
Thank you, sir. Well, I got two more, so buckle up. If we run over time, we're just going to have to run over time. Okay. They'll give us the.
It's a podcast. You can go as long as you want.
That's right. We're not going to go Rogan and go 3 hours. Okay, so let's get into your personal reflection.
Yeah.
So if you could go back and give yourself advice at age 30,
yes,
what would you say? What would you do?
Well, it has two parts. Something that I did right that I'd want myself back then to know, and some things I did wrong that I'd want myself to know. The thing I did right, and we kind of talked about it, was the diversity of the professional roles that I had. I purposely tried to learn about a lot of different areas of the business. I'm very thankful today that I did that I didn't just stay in just one area of the business. So I'm very thankful for that. The thing I wish I could go back and tell my 30-year-old self was I didn't invest in relationships both professionally and even personally the way that I should have. I was kind of a heads down. If I work really hard, good things will happen both personally and professionally. And I've learned over the years from people, I talked about earlier, learn from people who do things well. I got to observe a lot of people, both my personal life and in professional life, who balanced heads down, working really hard with investing in relationships. And I like to think I learned from them, and I'm better at it today than I was previously. Not perfect, but better. But I think 30-year-old me didn't understand that the way that older me understands that now.
I don't know if it's a younger guy thing, because I know that when I was young, I was kind of the same way. I'm like, and don't get me wrong, there's something to be said for putting your head down and making stuff happen.
Yeah.
But at the same time, I wish I would have given more attention. I was in sales, so, I wish I would have given more attention to, authentic networking. And my failure, and I say this all the time on here, is knowing when somebody's trying to mentor me and not paying attention. That's a young guy thing.
Yes.
You don't realize when somebody's trying to put into you.
Yes.
And then you go back, you're like, oh, I was an idiot.
Yes.
So
I have to tell you, one time I was in a meeting, David Glass said something profound that stuck with me. He said a lot of things that were profound, but one thing he said in particular is, life is a great teacher if you can afford the tuition.
Woo! That's a good one.
That one has stuck with me. It comes up numerous times throughout my personal and professional journey. He was a pretty smart guy, and that's just an example of how smart he was.
That's awesome. Okay, last question, Mr. Benedict.
Yes, sir.
What kind of legacy do you hope that you leave behind?
Yeah, I've taken a great pleasure in people that I have mentored, taught, learned, and helped develop over the years. And obviously, you want to do that not only in your professional life, but in your personal life as well, with your children, your friends, people, maybe friends that are going through a difficult time, and you want to help them just as much as in your professional life. And just part of the learning about the importance of relationships was, how can you be helpful to others, help grow them, develop them, and sometimes give them the tough love messages of, this is not cool, you're not. Being nice and being popular is great, but sometimes you have to speak hard truths, both in your personal life and your professional life. And I'm better now than I was. I still think there's things I let slide that I shouldn't. Both personally and professionally, but I think it's been one of those where you learn some of those lessons, and I think that's how you really leave a legacy. Is did you grow and develop people either by encouraging them or by telling them the hard truths that they needed to hear that maybe somebody else wasn't going to tell them.
Yeah, somebody's got to say something. And I feel like there's a lot of train wrecks that could have been avoided if somebody had just stepped in, because it's tough. Nobody wants to do it. It's not like you don't wake up first thing in the morning like, you know what, I'm looking forward to going and correcting him about that today.
It's not fun, but when Lee Scott was the CEO of Walmart, one of the quotes that really stuck with me from him was, sometimes a critical voice is the most helpful voice that you hear. And you recall, Lee was the CEO when Walmart was portrayed in some circles as the evil empire, the bad company. And it was really during his leadership that he said, you could ignore your critics, or you go listen to them and hear what they have to say, because they're not going to hold back anything. They're going to tell you what they think, and you may find nuggets of truth in things that are hard to hear. And obviously, as he's passed baton, then Mike Duke, and then to Doug, the company is now portrayed in a much better light and conducts itself in a much better way than it did perhaps previously, where it was this week's sales and lowest price and all that sort of thing. You can do a good business by conducting yourself better, and I think he really was one of the voices that manifested that itself in my thought process, and the way the even better company that Walmart is today than it was back then. And they were pretty big and pretty successful back then, but I think they're a model of how to run a good company that happens to be really big, really successful, but the way in which they conduct themselves, and there's other great retailers, I mentioned a few of them out there, but they're a better company today because I can go listen to people that absolutely hate us.
That's awesome.
And pull the nuggets out of that. So,
well, Scott, this has been wonderful. The time has flown by. I hope you'll come on again.
I bet. You know what? So now I'll have you guest on my podcast.
That's great.
I'm there,
dude.
We'll return the favor.
I'm there.
Right.
I appreciate you, sir.
You bet. My pleasure.